So much for the U.S. Supreme Court rolling abortion rights back 50 years. Arizona just punched the flux capacitor and time traveled back to 1864. Not 1964, 1864. Yes, during the Civil War, a year before slavery was even abolished with the 13th Amendment. It's also before the discovery of penicillin, x-rays, or antibiotics. But the Arizona Supreme Court ruled today that a 160-year-old law banning abortions at any point in a pregnancy can be enforced. That means that in 2 weeks from now, abortions in that state, in Arizona, will be illegal. There are no exceptions for rape or incest in this 1864 law. The only exception is if the mother's life is in danger. And even that is not a black or white decision, and it often comes with its own complications, as we know. Keep in mind that when this law was written, women could not vote. The idea of women even owning their own home was still a novel concept in some states. And speaking of states, Arizona wasn't one yet. Less than 10,000 people lived in what was then known as the Arizona Territory. Today, more than 7 million people do. That includes Republican Senate candidate and a contender to be Donald Trump's vice president, if he's the president and the Republican nominee, Kari Lake. She rushed out a statement, and it reads, in quote, in part, and I'm quoting her now, "I oppose today's ruling." But that statement requires a lot of context, given it wasn't that long ago that she said this about the very law that is set to go into effect.
We have a great law on the books right now. If that happens, we will be a state where we will not be taking the lives of our unborn anymore.
I'm incredibly thrilled that we are going to have a great law that's already on the books. I believe it's ARS 133603. So it will prohibit abortion in Arizona except to save the life of a mother. And I think we're going to be paving the way and setting course for other states to follow.
She even cited exactly which law it was. Lake, though, of course, is far from being the only Arizona Republican who is trying to distance themselves from today's ruling. Republican Congressman Juan Ciscomani has gone from saying, quote, "I applaud the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade," to calling today's ruling a disaster for women. Of course, the overturning of Roe v. Wade paved the way for what happened today. At the state level, Republican State Representative Matt Gress says today's, quote, ruling cannot stand. But it was just last year that he was pushing a bill to declare fetuses as people, which obviously would make abortion illegal. Here's also something that's interesting in light of today's decision. Arizona's former Republican governor, Doug Ducey, added 2 seats in a successful effort to stack the state's Supreme Court. In all, he appointed 5 of the 7 justices who ruled today. Doug Ducey said what happened today is not his preferred outcome. But remember this, the 15-week law that he did sign, which he said today he believed would be a better option, included this specific language, not to repeal, by implication or otherwise, the very 1864 law that will soon go into effect. There's a simple reason that so many Republicans are racing to revise their previous positions: the state's 11 electoral votes, a number that could very well decide who the next president will be, especially now that Arizona could soon be the first swing state with abortion on the ballot this fall, given abortion rights advocates say that they do have the signatures to give voters a direct say on this issue come November. My source tonight on what happens now and what this means is Nancy Northup, the president and the CEO for the Center for Reproductive Rights. And it's great to have you here because I think, just looking at this, and from people are trying to kind of grasp that an 1864 law is soon going to be the law of the land, what does this mean for women in Arizona in 2 weeks?
Well, that's the most important point. It could be very devastating once it goes into effect, and we don't actually know exactly when that's going to be, but very devastating. I mean, we've seen it in other states like Texas and the other states that have banned abortion, that it makes it dangerous for anyone to be pregnant in the state of Arizona. It means if you have a pregnancy complication, your doctor's going to be worried about criminal prosecution, not how can they give you the best of care. So it is very, very, very significant, a horrible decision today from the Supreme Court of Arizona.
I mean, is there any other, just the idea that it is from the 1800s, before penicillin was a thing, before antibiotics were a thing, before women could even vote and really have a say in something like this, I think kind of just blows your mind to think that is going to be the law, whether it's in 2 weeks and 45 days, whenever the actual enforcement goes into place. I just think it's the premise of a law from the 1800s being what's going to govern this is kind of mind-blowing.
Well, exactly. Neither the practice of medicine nor the rights of women in 1864 are what they should be today. So it is really problematic, but as you mentioned, Arizonans are going to have an opportunity, they should, to be able to vote for abortion rights in November this year on the ballot. And that's absolutely huge. So everyone who's outraged by today's decision should go to Arizonans for Abortion Access and see what they can do to help get the rights back in Arizona.
Well, what does it mean in the practical term, though? Because the Attorney General for the state was saying, that we're not going to prosecute doctors under this law. But I wonder realistically what that means, because it could be challenged at the county level. I think when doctors are trying to make a decision about is the life of the mother at risk here, if they delay care, that can often lead to damaging, consequences for these women, maybe potentially infertility even.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important statement by the Attorney General of Arizona that she doesn't believe it should be prosecuted, but that doesn't allow for doctors and nurses and all the people that help with abortion care be off the hook. Remember, this is the practice of medicine, medical malpractice insurance, your insurance has to be covered, all of that. So it is deeply problematic if this law stays on the books. Again, which is why it's so important that everyone start focusing on what to do in November to get the right to abortion back in the state of Arizona.
Nancy Northup, I want you to stay with us because obviously this decision also was a massive political earthquake today. And for the consequences of that, what that could mean, we also have joining us CNN anchor and the host of the CNN podcast, The Assignment, Audie Cornish, and Erin Carmone, a senior correspondent for New York Magazine, and the author of the upcoming book, Unbearable, Being Pregnant in America. And Audie, we were just starting the show last night with Donald Trump's vague statement about how he feels about abortions. He kind of thought that took this issue off the table a lot for him, but I mean, I wonder what you make of how today's decision alters that.
Well, I think one of the things you heard him say, he did allude to elections specifically, so he knows the stakes, and he knows that he doesn't think it's a winning issue for Republicans. But also the idea of leaving it to states is sort of a Roe-era political decision in a post-Dobbs political atmosphere, which means nobody is content to leave well enough alone at the state level, right? If you are an anti-abortion activist, you want to go a little bit further. You want that restriction a little bit tighter or all the way out, right? And if you are for abortion rights, you see the opportunity in the window to put this in front of voters and finally make good on what you've been saying publicly, which is that people do support abortion rights to some degree and in many ways. And so no one has any incentive to back down here. I don't know how you feel about it, Erin.
Well, I mean, we're seeing, Arizona's now joining all of these other states that have these really restrictive bans put in place where basically abortion is just not an option for women. And we've seen the political ramifications for that. I mean, there's a reason Republicans are freaking out today is because they know it has rewarded Democrats for the last 2 years.
I mean, if it isn't the consequences of their actions. For years, they have used this as a political ploy without fully grappling with the fact, one, that poll after poll, even before any vote was taken, shows that abortion rights are enormously popular in the United States. And two, that the ramifications of these laws go from people who just want to not be pregnant, which was a constitutional right until Dobbs, all the way to people who very much wanted to be pregnant and need medical care. You mentioned, both of you talked about how doctors have to make this decision whether to put their career, their institutions, their lives on the line. Imprisonment is at stake in the Arizona law. So I think people have actually seen in the last 2 years almost what these actually mean in practice. Before, they were political talking points that Republicans never actually had to suffer the real life ramifications of. Now you have cases like those brought by the Center for Reproductive Rights in which women became septic, were bleeding out in parking lots, were denied even exceptions that would have qualified under the law. And people understand that. I mean, there's research showing that many individuals actually directly know someone who has been affected by these laws when we leave it to the states. From a political standpoint, it also means that leaving it to the states becomes defined by the most extreme states, such as Texas, and if this goes into effect, now Arizona.